After we shared how we rebuilt and marinized 2 Cummins truck engines for our 78-foot boat, the comments section lit up with great questions, and now we're answering them. This is the first episode of our new Thursday series, Your Questions Answered. Blaine's taken on the most common and thoughtful questions from viewers like you, and at the end, we'll highlight one comment that really made us think. Stick around to see what it is and if it was yours.
Hey guys, welcome to this week's question and answer. This is the first time that we're doing this, so hopefully it'll work out well. I'm just going to get right into it. This is basically the main questions that were asked from last week's video or this past video, and we're just going to kind of try to tackle the important ones. So the first one we have here, and this was asked by multiple people, is Timothy O'Brien was the first one. He said, is it necessary that the engines counter-rotate? No, it is not. That was commonly done in the past. They would actually physically change the engine to rotate in reverse. With new transmissions these days, they're capable of running in forward or reverse. Doesn't matter. They can run full power either way. So in the boat, you have both engines spinning the same direction. One transmission spinning in forward, the other engine or transmission is spinning in reverse. And they do that perfectly. All right, so moving on to the next question. This one came from 1320 Fastback. I like what you did there. His question was, are you going to be able to sell the Detroits? This was actually another super common question that we got that people were really interested in. Long story short, no. Contrary to popular online belief, Detroit engines are not as popular as people think. And I tried to sell them as complete engines with transmissions. I tried to sell them as separate engines without transmissions. I tried to part them out. I tried to sell them on eBay. I tried to sell them on Facebook Marketplace. I tried to sell them to local Detroit specialists. Nobody wanted them. In the end, I could not even give them away. So unfortunately, what I thought I'd be able to reclaim some cost on, no, nobody's interested in that kind of an engine these days for most of anything. Sure, if I had a guy locally that needed some, I'm sure I probably could have gotten rid of them, but that's 5,000 pounds of iron that nobody's going to want to ship across the country. Next up, we've got a question from, who was it here? This is a tough one. Joe Mr. Kavika 3393. He says, I may have missed it, but what is your raw water pumping solution? We'll show that in future videos. I did something a little bit, I say special. It's not really special. It's similar to the way that the QSB engines did it in the marine sector, just not quite the same, but you guys will see that in future videos. All right, next up from Kenneth Nelson V7Z. Ask your engine programmer if they can program it for pilot injection. Yes, seeing as I am the engine programmer, I can program it for pilot injection. The Balder ECUs do everything that the factory ECUs can do in that regard. So no issues there at all, and it works great. All right, next up we've got from RX Calvosa. Is it true that marine engines are set up a little looser? And also, are you gonna ground hop those babies? Marine engines can be set up looser. That is usually when you're running the marine engines that are pure raw water cooled. So that means they pump the salt water through the engines. And the reason for that is the pistons see full heat and they will expand out where there's so much cold water running through the engine block that the engine doesn't expand as much, or the block doesn't expand as much. So you run into clearance issues between those two. With the standard heat exchange motors, you're running the same coolant temps that you're running on a street motor as well. So not really much of a change here. There might be some differences for ring gapping and such, depending on the loading of the engine. But as far as the basic typical looser, no, we don't run them any looser. Next question was the ground hop. Now, I'll admit I had to look that up. I wasn't familiar with that exact term. And what I assume you mean, and kind of what I found, is am I going to test these on a pallet or outside of the engine room before I put them in? While that would have been a good idea, it was just too challenging with everything that I had to do to get that set up properly, especially with the ECUs not mounted to the engines, having to set up the proper length for the harness. We just did full send, put them in the boat, and hope for the best. And fortunately, we were good. All right, next up we have Captain Ron. Captain Ron, I love it. Why would you use such a dark color on the engines? Most of the marine engines are white, so you can tell where any leaks are at where any leaks are. Just my 2 cents. That is a good point, and that is a very common thing done in the marine industry, or a lot of industry, I suppose. The main reason why is because I didn't want white engines. Yes, I 100% agree with the point. I've never in my life had a problem finding oil leaks on any color of engine, so it wasn't super important for me to paint them white. And Chip Foose, I think, said it best, and this is going to the car side of things. He says, when you go into, or in the automotive, when you pop the hood, the engine is the jewel of the engine compartment. That is where you want all of your effort to make it pretty. And I still have that ingrained in me, and in the boat, I wanted them to shine and look pretty. That's the diamond in the engine room. So I didn't go with white. I went with black, and Kapoor red metallic is the color. And honestly, they turned out great. Love the color. They look great in there. Happy with the choice. Okay, next question we have is from Ernesto Borg 9. Why wouldn't you go with the 5.9 liter? Way more reliable. Aren't the new ones self-destructing, i.e. the dreaded killer dowel pin? Hope you address that. Actually, it's the other way around. Some of the earlier 5.9s with mechanical injection pumps could theoretically have been more reliable, although I don't think there's any major reliability issues with the 6.7 that I didn't address. But the killer dowel pin was actually on the 5.9s. The 6.7s don't have that issue. So that wasn't something that I had to address in these engines. Okay, next up we've got from Styan Tiger. Do you have to ballast in the boat to compensate for weight loss? And do you need to have extra oil reservoir in the engines compared to what they have in a truck, as boat engines generally run harder? And also, by the way, couldn't you run a water-to-air intercooler? So I'll start with the first one. Do you have to ballast the boat? We may possibly have to ballast the boat. I've still got to get together with a marine architect to have some calculations done up. If there's any good marine architects out there that want to sponsor a boat for some stability calculations, we're happy to accept. I don't know yet. That may be a possibility. For now, I do have a 700-gallon water tank in the boat, in the keel, that I'm using just as ballast for now. So that should mostly cover the weight difference between the new and the old engines, at least enough to maintain the ballast of it. But we'll see. I still would like to talk to a marine architect. So the next question was the oil capacity. From the specs that I found for the marine version and the trucks, the oil capacity is the same. I haven't, they were both, I think, 12 liters, somewhere around in there. I could be wrong on that number. Don't quote me. Don't lambast me for getting it wrong. But I'm pretty sure that's what they both were. And not only that, the truck engines actually have the sump at the rear. So when you have an engine in a boat at a slight angle for shaft angle, it actually works out really well to keep the oil where it needs to be. So I don't see any issues with that. Last one, couldn't you run a water-to-air intercooler? You could. It would require a little bit of extra figuring to make that happen, because typically you don't have frontal airflow in the engine room, so you'd have to use some sort of a fan assembly for that. Might be some things you'll be interested in future videos, so stay tuned for that. A few other people asked some questions about our alternators. Mark S37 was the first. Did I correctly see double alternators? Why use small ones? Can starter batteries be charged from large ones by electronic gizmos, reducing mechanical complexity, or was it a deliberate choice? It was a deliberate choice. Not only that, the small alternators were already configured into the belt drive system, so keeping them was actually easier anyway. But I'm a big fan of redundancy. So yes, I could have had it done with a electronic gizmo, which I actually do have. However, the small alternators are the redundancy there, and they also completely provide all the power for the engine running. That battery that those charge is specifically for the operation of the engine. That's it. It doesn't even do the starting of the engines. It's the operational only. So that gives me lots of redundancy to make sure that when we're out at sea, something fails, that just gives me one more level of protection. Another question we had regarding the alternators from BDKW1. What size alternators are you running? We are running the stock Dodge alternators for the engine running, which quite honestly, I don't even know the size off the top of my head, so I'm not going to quote that. The other big alternators, those are Pentex PX 833 alternators. They are designed for 300 amps of output and can pretty much do that continuously. That's why they're so large. They're made to be able to dissipate and absorb that heat from generating that much power. I've got a second set of alternators. They're actually Delstar 300s based on the same configuration. They're like 90-pound alternators, so these things are massive. Same with the Pentexes that are running on my DC genset right now as well. And even though I can run any of those alternators at 300 amps continuous, I derate them down to about 150 amp continuous because I'm running two. And that keeps them alive considerably longer and keeps the heat down a lot less. Okay, we got a comment here from Woodwelder. Just interested, the cost of an in-box Cummins to all your work on the truck version. It's actually really difficult to find accurate Cummins pricing. I had one commenter say that he saw Cummins 300 horsepower engines on sale on a site for $10,000 brand new complete. I'm not buying that. That seems very wrong, seeing as even used ones on eBay are going for like 15K. New ones on eBay are 25,000. So I reckon that's possibly a bait and switch kind of website. Can't confirm it. Maybe there are, but it doesn't make sense to me. I would say they're probably up around the same ranges as all the other Volvos and Caterpillars and all that. Maybe a little bit less expensive, but let's say 18,000 per engine would be my guesstimate for what I'd be looking at for that. Yeah. And then very interested in your fabrication of the exhaust manifold. Nothing off the shelf, question mark. Actually, I did mention in there that we ended up going with OEM marine exhaust manifolds from a QSB slimline version because that project turned into an absolute nightmare. I wasn't happy with any of it, and I am not ashamed to admit that that was a huge mistake and waste of time. So yes, we did go with an out-of-the-box solution for that one, and it hurt because they were stupid expensive. Next question from Lana Warwick. I actually did a timestamp. 2 minutes, 50 seconds. More powerful equals the same reason they use different crown piston? I believe so. In the gasoline side of things, typically a reduction in compression, and that's the chamber in the marine pistons is bigger, so it would equal up to a lesser compression. Comes with more power, more boost kind of thing. I'm not a Cummins engineer. I can't say for sure that's why they did it. If you know, let us know in the comments. But that's typically why. And that's because they're running continuously at a different level, yada, yada, yada. But yes, basically it is because they're more powerful. So a lot of you keen-eyed people out there noticed the car in the background and knew what it was. However, being this is question and answer, George Luckert 5430. What's the big blue in the background? That's my 74 Pantera. I've had that car for 27 years at this point, and it's undergone all sorts of changes. There may be videos of that in the future, but right now it's going pretty much full race car. It's getting a new power going into it, which is pretty cool. Lots of other things. But yes, I've had that car for a very long time. And unfortunately, I feel really bad because I've been neglecting it for a very long time because we bought the boat, but I will be getting back to it. Right, now for the comment of the day. This kind of goes back to the last few comments. This is from the Swedish chef, or Sef. I'm pretty sure he meant chef. Will there be a third Cummins in the Pantera? No, but I'm sure you already knew that. Pantera is actually slated currently to receive a Bentley Continental GT W12 motor. So if some of you don't know what that is, look it up. It's a pretty cool engine. It's not the best out there. It's not the most powerful out there, but it's pretty damn cool. And torque monsters. They come forged internal, turbocharged from the factory. So I'm really looking forward to that project, but it's probably going to be a bit yet. Thanks for joining in on the Q&A, everybody. Love the questions. If you guys liked this part of the series, if you think this is something we should continue doing, let us know. We're super curious. And thanks, Swedish Chef, for the comment and the question. That put a smile on my face. Really appreciate that.
If you missed the original video where we rebuilt and marinized 2 Cummins truck engines for a 78-foot boat, go check it out. That's where this all started.